business saying, leave us alone, we're good, which is, for the most part, how CA started. CA has 4,000 users of Salesforce, but of those 4,000 users, a stat that I often go back to, we have 1 million page views a month. So we have 4,000 guys, but we're hitting the heck out of it. We have a new lead process, who we have our lead expert actually in the room. We're processing 400,000 leads a year through Salesforce. We have other people from CA here who probably don't realize that number because it's pretty seamless and it's easy. At CA, the key in developing Salesforce was that it was chartered as the opportunity and pipeline management system for sales. So sales says, we own the pipe. This is how we want to see it. We're going to manage it ourselves. That's okay. She switched me fast. But in doing that, I can go. It wasn't always a tight ship, right? So sales took it on, and sales managed it. And within CA, we have a sales department that kind of sits parallel to field sales. So they're a little bit more of a governance-like structure. They took ownership of it, and they put some things in place. But I'd say a combination of fear and ignorance bred that. In the beginning, everybody was a little bit nervous about making changes, even within the business. So that normal kind of running around with your hands over your head, screaming fire thing, the minute they got their hands on something was not happening. It was more of, okay, we can do a lot of things in here, you know, maybe we should learn it. And more people within the business start to learn about the system. There were some things set up, a change control board, which consisted of every stakeholder in the business, marketing, sales, support, whomever had a part at the time in the deployment. Very structured, 90-day functional releases, the largest always being a preparation for a fiscal year, which was generally some kind of toss-up of coverage model or strategy, territories, those types of things. But all developed externally. So no internal IT support aside from basic, very basic level 1 issues, and always with a dotted line reporting structure into the business. So at some point, you start to realize that you're supporting an application as a business. You put structure in place for yourself because you want to be responsible. But at the same time, is it responsible to take on IT support at the cost of the business with the guys who make the money that they make supporting the sales organization? Then you divert their concentration from making money from sales to learning how to write Apex code. So you take a sales guy now whose biggest contribution to the table is his knowledge of sales, and you teach him IT, and he kind of changes. And then his value changes. What you're paying him is different. How you resource him is different. So CA basically made a decision to mitigate that from getting any worse than it was. The bigger the deployment, the more support, the more business resources. So we've evolved now into increasing our IT support, using and leveraging our IT structure. And at the same time, IT has had to come up to speed on learning about Salesforce, on learning more agile methods of development, basically tailoring their strategies into now, getting away from that very, very robust governance model of the larger software implementations of the past and getting into a less sticky model. So they mirror the business in that they are structured in a way, which Andre will get into a little bit deeper, to support the business on a line-by-line level. but we work together, and they're getting more and more up to speed in that. We developed an engagement model, and I think everybody needs one, because the minute you have this joining of two ideas, you kind of have to define the line. So if you look at this slide, the white is meant to be the business, and the blue is meant to be IT, and where we kind of meet. We meet a little bit in our value analysis, where we determine if the changes we want to make to Salesforce make sense from a bottom line level. We do that with IT guys because they have to tell us how big or how small these crazy ideas that come from us are. We're in an exercise of that right now. We're preparing for fiscal year 11, and we're pounding back and forth, IT and the business. Well, can we do this? Well, can we do this? Maybe you could do this. You know, that kind of thing is part of that value analysis. But for the business, it's more about, does that process you want to do really make sense overall? Is it a Band-Aid? Can we take a step back, look at it a different way? We do that completely before we take that next step. So when we get into implementing something, all of that's been mitigated. The requirements are clear. Everybody's on the same page. So we kind of share how we make that happen, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then there's the support side. We put it in. Everybody understands it. They're all on the same page, and they support it. The IT department basically picks up the ball there. But we look at it because sometimes when you see spikes in supporting things, it might not have been the right decision from a business side. So we have to feed that back in the loop. So it kind of runs like a loop. Every other week, we have a value analysis meeting. It's an open forum. You have something to say, you come. It doesn't really matter where you're from. If you're from a department that doesn't use Salesforce and you feel like using it and you want to get in on it, you come there and you tell us why. Generally, that crew will come back and say, give us a process. And it's a pretty long process from that respect, and I mean long for Salesforce. Week or two of hounding back and forth on paperwork to get the right process in place. But you have to have one so that everybody who's at the table understands what they're talking about, right? So they come back with their value analysis proposal, and they hash it out. It's a global call. There's one done in Asia Pacific, and there's one done here in the States. Everybody participates, and everybody has an equal say. And it sometimes turns into a pretty heated debate, but when you get to the implementation stage, there's no surprises. The better you do the beginning, the smoother it is running it through. The project stakeholders are the people who request it, plus the people who support it, plus the people who have a stake in it. So everybody's in. Their involvement is different based on who they are, but everybody's in. In terms of ongoing support, like I said earlier, we have a user community. We have deployed the idea exchange. We use it internally. We have people in the business that monitor it. But we also have weekly meetings when our queues go up in terms of supporting the application that help us to leverage the IT department and their reporting so that we can get to value analysis again. Because certain things can be cumbersome when they're in real life. So they might make it to the next stage. 90-day releases, I mentioned earlier. Anybody who's worked with me at CA knows it's the first thing I whip out when somebody says, I want something tomorrow, especially if it's bigger than a bread box. We do this. This is just an example of a real-life one that we actually used when somebody from another department asked us to implement something immediately. And we explained to them that if we do it responsibly, it'll be out by this day. We try to keep in that window. Andre's going to have a big release in April, so he's got a little head start. But normally, 90 days. It might not work for you. It depends on how much resources you put behind something. But the idea is that people have a realistic idea that even though you can write a field in 3 seconds, it isn't best to ever write a field in 3 seconds. It's better to understand the implications of doing that and knowing where it should go, where it falls in your process, and having a little piece of paper, 5, 6 pages, that tells you why it's there. That's all. It's just kind of, it's somewhere in between. In the IT department, you have to try to get flexibility, normally, right? Normally, the IT department, and in our case, the IT department struggles to be more flexible because they've been bred not to be as flexible as a sales department, not at all. And on the other side, a business struggles with governance. We're fast, and we want to sell. I come from sales. So sometimes we cut corners when it comes to documentation and unless the IT guys kind of remind us, we still do sometimes. But the key is to try to balance that. And we kind of had a joke in our dry run that Andre is the triangle, right? That he's trying to, you'll hear what he does on a day-to-day basis, and you'll realize that that is that point, that balance. Getting everything you can get for the sales guys yelling, I want every kind of contact database in the universe. And the IT guy who says our enterprise contact database is this one. So you have the two, and you kind of have to find the middle. Maybe you don't get 800 of them. Maybe, you know. So that's Andre. You'll hear more about him. Quick checklist on what to do, at least my opinion on what to do, is have a charter. Know why you're getting Salesforce when you're getting it, and everybody clear on it. Because you can do everything from track the janitor's weekly schedule to the enterprise financials, right, coming out. You can do everything. And if you're not buying it to do everything, you should let everybody know from the outset what we're buying it for. And then if you have a reason to use it for something else, you go right into the governance process. An engagement model. Start from the beginning with some IT support. Maybe it isn't, maybe they're not ready to jump right in, get into a mature model, feel them out, let them understand, you know, where it's going and understand their point of view of where they've been. Process documents. They're not huge. I came from Lufthansa, and at Lufthansa, if you wanted to make a change to a field, it was like 30 pages in German. It's not necessary, right? It's 5-6 pages, key points, so everybody at the table understands what it is. That's all. Just so that people know where it starts and where it ends in relation to the processes that come before and after it. Very simple.
I think that's a really good one, too, because, you know, you move on to the next thing. So you've made your change, and you've moved on to the next thing. And a year later, someone goes, why the heck did we do this over here? And if maybe your team has got new roles, they've moved in, maybe some have left the company, you need to make sure you have an understanding of why you did that, because there was a business reason behind it. Especially if you have a strong governance model, there was a good reason why you did it. So having some, you know, we're not asking for a book, but to have some kind of, you know, agreement from everybody, this is why, this is what, this is how, and you have that for historical references purposes too. I think that's really useful.
We don't cancel meetings at CA. It's something that we're really good at. It's something I wasn't used to when I came to CA, but for the most part, if you cancel meetings, you get poo-pooed. We don't do it. And I think it's great, right? I think if you have a particular meeting that's an open forum, even if nobody comes, you'll find something to talk about, particularly if it's people from the business. So knowing that they're every other week, making them open, and driving that accountability is really important, I think.
You have like actual sign-offs, right?
Yes. Every stage of that previous timeline has every stakeholder sign off on it. And we just, about a year ago, started a charter for the stakeholder. So he understands he's giving us 20% of his time and that he is the expert in these things. And if these things come up in the project, he's the person that's accountable for how they're handled. So that everybody kind of is, it's big. Accountability is big, especially in a governance model. We change, the process changes, quarterly at least. The business changes, that's the whole idea. If you stay in that process, the same one all the time, the business value analysis meetings only came up 6 months ago because people were feeling a little out of touch. We were doing things a different way. That kind of thing. Look at it, make the changes that are needed so everybody feels good about it. Same thing. So I have turned over my crown to Andre. So I'm doing something different at CA now, and Andre actually has picked it up.
This model was nurtured, created, time-tested, some amazing releases that have gone out. I mean, 4,000 users on Salesforce.com, and they're continuously innovating and adding functionality for their users along the way. So this is, really a large implementation in action, changing regularly. So she created this process, working with her counterpart in IT, who was Andre, and now he's got a new role.
Right. So you can, if you don't mind. So as Irene had mentioned, I just recently joined sales operations. I was in IT for about 11 years. Last 4 was CA. First thing I want to point out before I start, when I was on the IT side, whenever we had problems, she was the one that was at fault. Now that I own it, the IT people are always the ones that are in trouble. So now it's always right. So having come from IT and taking over a governance model, and I wanted to just talk about what it was like to be a consumer of it. Amy's slides were right. They hit the nail on the head. When you're on the IT side, it's very easy to get the requirements thrown over the wall, and you're supposed to come up with it and build it. What the governance model from a business perspective does is it really helps flesh out better requirements. The scope in general is fairly locked down. The engagement between the IT team and the business side is vastly improved. There's a lot more interaction in there. And one of the things that's key is that everybody's got skin in the game. Everyone knows which pieces they're accountable for. So at the end of the day, when you get into your development cycle and you finish, and if it wasn't accurate and things didn't work out, it's not, well, the IT folks did it and we didn't, we told them what we wanted, et cetera. So what this model has done is really bridge that gap, and it's done a lot of improvement within there. Along with that, it just continues to help flesh out a project from its entirety. What does it take from the requirement perspective all the way through testing and training? And then also, as I mentioned, everybody's on the same, marching to the same tune. So having taken it over, what are some of the things that we have to deal with? I think that obviously maintaining discipline is a big factor. One of the things that we're running into a lot is people want more and more and more all the time. They think, well, Salesforce is really flexible, you could do it fast. I just had an email today from somebody from the marketing side. I don't know if you're familiar with a product called Reference Store, and they want to integrate Reference Store, and they want to know why it's not on the docket to be implemented by the end of the month. And yeah, it's number 1.2.3 or something like that. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of improvement as well is the continuous improvement around the IT side. So the more we engage with the IT teams, the more we teach them and train them and have them learn more and more about the business process, the more valuable they become to us. They can advise us on things. Generally there's been a divide in many instances between IT and business. When we come to them and somebody says, well, I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, if they understand what the business process is, the advice that they'll give you on whether or not you should do it or how long it will take is much more valuable, and you can take it to heart rather than just thinking, oh, it's just an IT person trying to prolong the project and they want to pad it or what have you. The metrics, obviously, in lessons learned, I think everyone's heard those terms. Some of the metrics that we're starting to use a lot more of is the adoption metrics, looking at the training. I hate to admit it, but we rolled out some functionality last month, and I'm getting the reports back from the learning folks on how many people access the training. We correlate that back to service desk tickets related to those issues to look at are people accessing the training and then they don't know what to do, or they don't know what to do and they didn't access the training, et cetera. So those things are also very important. So what are some of the best and the worst aspects of it? As I'd mentioned, some of the best aspects is everybody is marching to the same tune. Everybody's together. People know where they sit within the accountability process for a project, and that part is fantastic. One of our releases that we called it the 6.0 release, as you can see there, 500-line deployment plan, which is, if you think about what Salesforce is supposed to be from a flexibility, do things quick, to then consider 500 lines of deployment and all the data migration and all those things that had to happen within there, it's pretty complicated. And if you don't have that business and IT engagement, personally, I don't think it would be possible. On some of the worst aspects of it, the 90-day releases are very challenging, and they're very challenging in multiple ways. They're challenging on the group, so my team, because we're continuously rolling out new things and looking at new requirements. It's difficult for the IT teams because they roll out something, they go into a super care situation, and they've got to start on the next thing right away. And in a lot of cases, it's really difficult for the business users themselves. Not every business can really consume that much change every 3 months, changing processes and things like that. It definitely requires a lot of dedication and continuously going through the model and making sure that you can handle some of the political and the inevitable fire drills that come up. So I've been talking a lot about IT and business alignment. I think this slide is a pretty good indicator of what we've tried to do, and it's been pretty successful for us. And it's all about aligning the business and IT. Across the top there, we've got the different verticals that represent the sales cycles that I'm assuming most of us would go through pretty much the similar ones. Within those different boxes, we have on the sales operations team either one person assigned to each one, or one person might have more than one ownership. But the key being that within the business solutions, the IT side, we have the same alignment. So the IT group that supports us has somebody that is tied into territory and quota, and somebody that's tied into quote management. So those folks will continue to work together, continue to learn not only the system capabilities, but again, the business knowledge, and be able to really have some deep knowledge within that. The data governance one, just the horizontal there, I'm sure most of you have probably had similar challenges. Accounts, you go in and you search for IBM, and you get 3,000 versions of IBM in there. So having somebody dedicated to that data governance has also been something that's really helped us out a lot. And I think that one is, it might be a small line across there, but in my opinion, it's probably one of the most important ones, because that ties into all the other reporting that you do down the line. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So a different checklist here on how to get started. So establishing a dedicated sales ops team is what we've done at CA. It's working really well for us. The team is dedicated to Salesforce as a platform, along with business process improvements and things like that around Salesforce. The release cadence, as I had mentioned, 90 days works for us. For many companies, it might not work. Some companies, you might not want to have that much change. It really depends on that. So picking the right release cadence is going to be important. The prioritization process, right? 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, can't have it. It's something that we've been very strict on. There's got to be value. You know, what's the ROI? Why is it more important than something else? And within that, too, also the feasibility. Is it something that's going to be more than 90 days? Do we need to look at it maybe at a different time? As Irene had mentioned, when we do our fiscal year cutovers, we tend to have a little bit larger release. So some of these things we wait until that period, so then we cut over to a new fiscal year with that other functionality. The communication, obviously another really big one, right? Letting people know, what are they getting? Why are they getting it? What is it going to mean to them? And where do they go to get help? Either through training or who to contact. Those 4 things are really important within our model. And The data governance, I've already talked about that. And then IT team. Getting the IT team on board, making sure that they get used to that release cadence, that they also help you look at this from, it's sales information. It doesn't need to be into a SOX compliant type of governance model. You could do things quicker, be a little bit more flexible, but getting them to really learn and understand the business is a big key factor.
We're talking about CA, right? Huge global deployment. But if you think about it, a smaller organization, maybe you don't have a whole IT group. Maybe there's not a one-to-one person, but you're going to have an admin or someone that you're giving requirements to. So, having some form of this type of model is going to be really important to make sure that as you're using all the great, cool, flexible tools that Salesforce brings to the table, that there's rationale behind it. Everyone's aware of when things are going in and how. So some of the things that, if you're going to start a model like this that we are all talking about, some of the things you might want to be considering is, start small. Pick one process. Pick one release you're going to have. There's only going to be 3 things in it. And just try to test out a process. See what would work. Find out people's opinions on it. They use the ideas technology. Maybe you could set that up for a team that's going through this. So really start in an area that brings high value to you, right? So it's going to have a really positive impact on the business when they actually get the tools in place. But maybe as far as setting up a model, it's kind of a contained, smaller type of a thing. You have to have executive sponsorship because ultimately the political battles that can happen with all of those competing number ones, they're going to escalate. So what you need to make sure is that you have executive sponsorship and alignment so that there's someone ultimately saying, yes, but this is why we're doing it, and we're following this great model that these guys created. It works, and this is why. You definitely need to make sure that you have that there. Oh, hey, listen, room 13, 1 second. I'll get there later. And you want to have a process that both makes things repeatable, but flexible at the same time. So don't just think you're going to do it this one way, and that's the way you're going to do it. These guys have changed their model just in the last year probably a couple of times, and you will too. Salesforce.com, again, quick, I can go in there and just add a field, and I can change it, and I can have a star or whatever you want to do, but why, how, really think it through, have the process there that helps you kind of navigate that, and then ultimately, expect to be flexible along the way. Expect that your admins or your IT people are going to say, no, this is my process, I got it, I know what to do. So you have to make sure that everybody's on board. So you need to be flexible as you're creating this and be attuned to the other's needs, but also the process needs to be flexible and growing and changing. So that's what we were going to cover today. I think we've made up time, so I think we're not going to hold you over even with those. There's a survey, an online survey. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but we've got an online survey. We'd love to have your feedback. What's useful? If you're in early stages of setting up a governance model, your feedback might be different than someone who's already got one in place. But we'd love to get your feedback. So make sure as you go through all of the sessions, not just this one, that you are filling it out. And you've got a chance to win an iPod Nano. So let's talk about your questions. Questions for Andre, questions for Irene. And there's a microphone behind you, but I think we could probably hear you in this room.
I always like to be heard.
There you go.
My name is Ruben Shelef, Out of the Box Consulting. What we do, we actually advise our clients to do some sort of this model when they have between 10 and 100, maximum 300 users on Salesforce. And it's always a challenge to convince that they need this model. And this model is required, like you said, even if you're small. So take one process and do it. Just one field, just have one, not even 5 pages, one paragraph, something. And it's very hard to convince both the IT department at that stage and especially the business. What in your opinion, and this is open to all 3 of you, given your record and your involvement with other clients, what is the point, the size of the company or number of Salesforce users, where you say that's the number that this has to be implemented, so in a year, 2, 3 down the road when they grow, it's not a disaster. Because usually we're called in when there is a major disaster. Like 3 years ago, they were supposed to implement this and
Right.
go fix. So what is that break-even point when you say, if I would be managing that company or responsible for this, this has to be done?
You want to take that, or you want me to?
I mean, I can answer that. So from my perspective, I'm not so sure I would limit it to the number of users, but more around the processes. So if it's spanned across, let's say, sales and marketing, and then when you start getting into these concepts of, hey, flag this field in the opportunity so it's something custom that I can use within marketing, those sorts of things is when I think you need to have this. Anytime you start adding things, really, if you're going to add something customized to or create a custom object, you should have some form of governance. Obviously, it probably won't be this extensive, but to answer your question specifically, I would say when processes span across more than one.
And I would actually say everybody should be doing something like this. Because honestly, it's so easy to configure things that even when I'm just playing with things sometimes, I forget what I just did. I'm 45 steps away from what I did, and then I'm using the application going, what? Why isn't this, what? You know, I'm forgetting. So I think our professional services, I think in your business, you know, we're not asking you to write a novel about it. We're just asking you to maybe start with, you know, and I don't want to necessarily talk about all the tools you can use, but a simple Word doc, a spreadsheet, I mean, that's like bare bones of how you could start to document this kind of stuff. But it really is important. I mean, we try to do that even when we're doing demonstration systems. You know, we're setting those up to show a customer. We want to remember all the things that we put in place. So I would definitely recommend it no matter what size you are and no matter how many processes you're. Yeah. I agree. It supports your business, so yeah. Yes, in the back.
So my favorite is we have a joke between us, head count. But it's about the return on the dollar. You put them up, and everybody has to agree on the return on the dollar. So if there's 30 of them, I'd put 30 of them in the room and let the guy who wants to make a change that affects 3 people hash it out with the guy who wants a change that affects 3,000, and everyone will come out in agreement of what goes first. So it's all in the room, everything on the table.
And we're joking a little bit about the head count thing, but it really is true, right? If you have something that absolutely has to go in today, then show me the head count reduction for whatever that functionality is going to replace, right? Hard dollars.
Hard dollar saving.
Yeah.
Or hard dollar coming in, especially right now.
And it sounds, you know, probably a little bit, I don't say Ivan the Terrible or something, right? We're really heavy-handed.
Throwing them in the gladiator pit and fight it out.
But,
yeah.
I mean, either that's exactly it. Either it's going to bring more in, or it's going to reduce what's going out.
So if you had two things, and one was going to maybe generate $500,000 in revenue, and one had the potential for $200,000 in revenue, you would go with the 500 just on dollar amount, or that would be one of the criteria?
It's effort against. So it isn't just
right. So it's effort against
what it took
that
to
amount.
save, what it
Got
took to save it, versus what it took to save it, or what it took to generate it. Either way, what does it say? It's
Does that help?
Bribes.
Bribes. These two people can't be bought. They're too tough.
We've been accused.
Yes.
Did you have a threshold of deal size that you required for the sales guys to make sure opportunities were entered as you rolled out Salesforce.com? You know, one issue that we're discussing is you really want to have everything down to nuts and bolts in the Ethernet cable, or is it big deals only?
We implemented the direct model in Salesforce initially. So enterprise, direct business, no partner business, no volume business, all on the top. We're in volume now, but we're a few years in, 3 or 4 years in. But it took a lot for them to get it, because it took a lot for them to show that value that return on managing that kind of volume in Salesforce.
And whenever you were doing a direct, did you have to set a threshold or just everything?
Everything in.
Yeah, there's a lot of our customers who say, and there's a couple even that have posters around their company that says if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. So don't even try to bring it up later. Even if it was just $5,000, doesn't exist.
Same idea.
So it's quite common. Yeah.
The previous question, how do you differentiate for your ROI when you have these competing projects with regard to your hard savings versus your soft savings versus the time value of money? Because you can have a $200,000 return versus a $2 million return, but the $2 million return is over 7 years.
It's similar process. What is it going to take to? What do we need to spend to have either one? Is going to be one of the process or one of the criteria. What the overall impact will be to the system-wise? Is it going to have other implications? That sort of thing. And then, if we have something with some really good ROI like that, potentially you increase your budget to do it. That's another option. Certainly.
I don't think it was any of us. I don't know what just happened.
Just another point on the soft versus hard savings. The number gets made up by the hard, and the decision is swayed by the soft. But that's it. The number gets made up by the hard savings. It moves to the front of the line, but the focus or the favorites come for the rest. It's really only aesthetics.
A question in the back? Oh, no. We love you.
No, I was there for a long time.
I'm sorry.
If the IT guys and the business guys don't sit at the same table, then the IT guy never sees what's coming before it comes to him. So he'll see it when he gets the paper, but he isn't going to see it from a meeting and go, oh, I think they're going to want to do this. Based on his research about Salesforce and his learning about new innovation coming out of Salesforce, that IT guy can't truly leverage himself if he doesn't sit at the table with the same business guy that feeds off him. So I think that's why the line is so blurred.
Yes, IT guy.
It's the PM who makes you fill out your time. The guy who runs the books on the project is an IT guy, but he has equal accountability with a business lead on the exact same milestones.
Yeah. So, for example, our fiscal year 11 project, I'll have an IT manager, IT project manager, and then it's me. So it's going to be me and that person. And if it fails, we both failed the project together. By the way, we are an SAP shop, so we have the same model that we run within SAP we use for Salesforce. It's just that the governance around documentation and those sorts of things has been decreased because it's a more flexible platform. It's not SOX compliant and all those things. Yes.
Yeah.
5? There's me and then 5 folks. So the global team is myself and 5 other members. And then we've got regional sales ops teams that they help. They're very much engaged with us throughout the process. So we're continuously looking at from a global perspective, right? Because we've got business in Europe.
But they have
Asia.
shared roles, right?
Yeah.
So those guys run all the apps behind sales ops in each region, and a piece of their job is Salesforce. So I'd say in like total, maybe it's 10.
Yeah.
All one.
to organize them. They run this kind of event 600 times a year. They operate in 22 countries. They operate in 7 different languages. We have 5 CRM platforms, 11 social processing platforms, 13 finance platforms. We have every kind of combination of technologies. It's an absolute bloody shambles. And they grow through acquisition. So
So it's only adding
It
on
sounds
as
like
you go.
us. Sounds like
Yeah.
us maybe 4 years ago.
yeah, and every single event team, every single business unit, which is geographically bound, generally seems to think they're extremely special.
They have a lot of
Of
law.
course.
We add lots of value.
So special, so different.
Precisely. And so when we started this out, we were given this mandate, which is effectively tear out the technologies and make it work for that business unit, make it work for that one and that one. So we're 4 business units in, about 600 users. We've got a global sales overlay team which is working in 12 countries. And we're at the sort of midpoint in our implementation. We've got probably, it's not 80-20, we're 90-10, covers most of the basics. But what the company is now saying, we've got a soft mandate from the worldwide board to say, now we'd like to be interoperable. When we have IBM, we've got IBM 27 times, or actually we've got lastminute.com 84 times in our database across the world. We want there to be one, and we want to have clear hierarchies of organizations. We want to sort out all these rules, and we'd like to be interoperable. So we've got to transition from what's been a face-to-face, one-on-one interaction with business units to, in 3 months' time, we're going to be doing Web to Lead as a global development piece for everybody. So I'm trying to work out how best to transition from this face-to-face, individual steering groups, individual engagements, through to everybody's on a global call. Now we're going to tackle it as a group. And at the moment, we've still got a soft mandate. We haven't got an explicit, everybody will collaborate, put your own individual bats and clubs down, and start to work together. So a sort of lengthy explanation, but just some ideas about how we can get from A to B.
I mean, one of the things that works for us is that the people within the call, so when we have our value analysis call, we have the different regions participate. And what will happen is if something, so now that time has gone by, if something is being requested, they're the first ones to say, this didn't go through the value call.
Yeah.
Why is it on the list? Where did this come from?
Yeah.
So in a way, they've kind of pitted each other against each other in the fact of, we want to know what's going on, and you're not going to do something without us. So, I mean, to answer your call, I think if you go back to the beginning of what Irene had put on here, executive sponsorship, right?
Yeah, that
So
you've got to have.
how can
the
you have a
soft-
soft mandate? It's like, hey, if you want to come into
Why
work
they're gonna
tomorrow,
do it or
okay.
not,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we're at a stage of, we think interoperability and sharing of data is important,
Oh,
but we haven't got to the, you will all work
Right.
this way, and that means you're going to have to standardize and harmonize. So
Right.
part of the,
I would focus on the benefits that they're going to achieve
That's-
once you get them there. As you're going to communicate, if you just go say, hey, we're taking away all your autonomy of that great system you had, and now it's got to be global. If you really focus on what's it going to mean to them, if they could see their one customer in every piece of interaction and what that value brings, I think that'll help from the user's perspective, but you absolutely have to have a very hard mandate, documented, letting everyone know that this is the path moving forward.
I mean,
So are you guys going to be at the Birds of a Feather lunch tomorrow, do you think?
Yes.
12:30 in the dining hall. There's a Birds of a Feather lunch. There's going to be a high-tech area. These guys will be there, so follow-up questions, come and approach them. I want to thank these guys so much for coming and sharing
you.
their story. Hopefully you guys found it useful.
thank you.
And I think we're out of time, so thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.